When you play the Game of Thrones,
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
All right, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. Today's video is kind of going to be like a response reaction type video. In the past, I have done videos, especially with RedTeamReview, maybe responding to some of his takes and Preston Jacobs' takes. And this is going to be very similar to the Jon Snow show video I made about the sequel show that was planned but then canceled. I just find that sometimes they make really interesting discussion type videos, and a lot of the times I feel, not a lot of the times, but I am somewhat on the opposite side of some of their takes, and this is another one of those videos as we're talking about Arya and the sequel show that maybe are in talks. We got some interesting things coming out about George R. Martin and Macy Williams, and they had some sort of meeting and possibly working together in the future. And so I wanted to kind of give my thoughts on this. I haven't really talked about the possibility of an Arya sequel show much on the channel outside of like live streams here and there. But I wanted to talk about it because I think I have a very different take from Preston Jacobs and RedTeamReview. And I think it's kind of a bit of an interesting issue because I think I myself has a very different position on HBO and what they should do with the A Song of Ice and Fire projects. And also, this is not a video that, you know, I'm hating on RedTeamReview or Carmine and Preston Jacobs. I think they are great YouTubers. I think this is just some friendly, interesting conversation, and all the love to them. I'll have their video linked in the description at the very top if you want to check theirs out before or after watching mine. So let's talk about it. The thing that they discussed that I want to talk about, which isn't majority of the video, the little small part of their video, is they kind of talked about how the Arya Stark sequel show would not be good for HBO. It would be a terrible idea and it wouldn't work. And they kind of talked about that for numerous reasons. Like, Arya Stark is not the most interesting character, you know, past like season 4. And it kind of being a show going away from Westeros and kind of Game of Thrones as a whole, it would be very different like story and or show. And so I kind of want to give my own thoughts on that. I disagree with that. Not a lot, but I disagree with it to enough. I think that where I would go with it is different. Whereas I do believe, in my opinion, all sequel shows, in my opinion, that follow almost directly after Game of Thrones, like with it still has all of our main characters. It's all basically a follow-up of the main story, of the main show. I don't think is a good idea, right? But I do think there are stories in there that would work better than others. So am I saying in this video that I want them to do sequels that are very close to the end of Game of Thrones? No, I don't think that's a good idea at all. Game of Thrones is one of the biggest flops of all time for a reason. So if you're going to do sequels, I think they need to be sequels that are following a next generation of characters. So basically going from, say how in the normal story we start at, you know, kind of the starting of Robb and Jon Snow and Daenerys, and they're kind of taking over the next generation from people like Robert Baratheon and Ned Stark and Jon Arryn and Rhaegar, Aerys, all those type of people. There's that next generation of people. I think that's what I would do if I was going to do a sequel of the actual Game of Thrones universe. And so I want to make that very clear. That's what I would do if I was doing a sequel. But given what HBO has given us, I find it kind of ironic that the same people, Carmine, Preston Jacobs, and this is why I made a response video to their video about the Jon Snow sequel show, thought that was a good idea, but then think the Arya Stark show is a bad idea. I just don't follow that train of logic for me, just based upon the fact that Jon Snow, in my opinion, is a worse character throughout all of the show than Arya Stark is. Jon Snow, basically, the only thing I thought you could do with the Jon Snow show that made any type of sense was a self-contained story about Jon and the things that happened in the main story. And maybe his stuff with the wildlings. But this idea of Jon being involved with politics in the North and Bran as king and Daenerys coming back, I thought all that didn't make any sense because nobody liked the ending of Game of Thrones. And if you did, well, good for you, but majority of people did not. Why would you want to follow up that show that we didn't care at the end of it anyway, right? Like, we don't care about Bran becoming king, all this stuff we hate, right? So why would we want to see that again? Or trying to fix the ending of Game of Thrones? Whereas the Arya Stark show, whereas I do disagree, I think Arya Stark is not a great character. She doesn't have a lot of growth post like season 4, season 5-ish. And so where I think that a new show where you're taking Arya and you're going what's west of Westeros, the reason I think it's a decent to good idea is because you're going to have to build new characters. You're going to have to make, new, adventures. You're going to have to completely freshen up the Game of Thrones universe, right? It's not going to be the same things that are over and over and over again. If we want to see the Civil War, the politics of the houses, all of those things are already being done in House of the Dragon, whether you like it or you don't. That is what is going on, right? We've had the story of kind of Game of Thrones where it's the Civil War, the fight for the throne. We've had that story, and we've had, there's another story like that with House of the Dragon. And Duncan Egg is going to even shift that, right? We're going to go to more of a Mandalorian, but in the A Song of Ice and Fire universe type story with a character like Dunk and a character like Egg. Those are going to be our main characters, going to be more of a grounded story. And so doing a story like, with Arya and what's west of Westeros, I think there's just this idea that, there's nothing that they can really do that would be interesting because they're leaving the main, Westeros and all the things we know behind is not a good argument. I think that if they have creative writers, which again, HBO, my faith in them has been very much shattered. But if you were going to try to do a story, what could you do with it? Well, like they even referenced in their video about Alyssa Farman and her story and how captivating and interesting that was, why don't we have Arya doing a story where she's following in the footsteps of Alyssa Farman? Now, I know another kind of issue and wrinkle to this is House of the Dragon kind of screwed up Alyssa Farman's story with the dragon eggs and kind of the story of how that goes in House of the Dragon. But let's just remove that. You could have Arya Stark following in, the footsteps of what happened to Alyssa Farman, what was her inevitable fate, all these different things. You can create these different land masses that we do know, right? There's these like 3 islands west of Westeros. But then further on, you can expand the show into something else. Are we going to say the world of A Song of Ice and Fire is kind of like Earth, right? It's a spear, like eventually Arya would just go to the east, right? Go into Essos, the Far East, where Ashai is. That would be really cool. Let's say Arya, through season 1 or however long you're going to do this show, it's her following the footsteps of Alyssa Farman and uncovering, the truth behind her adventures and where she eventually got to. All of that could be really cool because, again, remember, show viewers won't know who Alyssa Farman is. She's never brought up in the show. She's never brought up in House of the Dragon. She's never brought up in the show canon or shows at all. So that story would be completely fresh to a new viewer, right? And then you could take it to learning and showing us Ashai. We've never seen Ashai in the books, and we've never seen it in the show either. It's a place that would be full of intrigue as well. You could go to that. And I'm someone that doesn't really love Essos and the history and the lore there because I'm just more interested in Westeros. But I think story where you take a character that's a fan favorite. Arya Stark is a fan favorite, regardless of what us book fans think or, us nerdier, I guess more nerdier audience of Game of Thrones is. The general community love Arya Stark. Even after the show's failure of an ending, Arya Stark would have that pull. And when you have these new ways and stories that you could tell that's so different and so fresh from what we're getting in Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, even Dunk and Egg would be different from that idea. I actually think that, of all the sequel shows that I've heard that have been talked about, Daenerys coming back to life and her shenanigans with Drogon and all that stuff, or Jon Snow in the North, the wildlings, and him uncovering some others plot that doesn't matter anymore because, again, Game of Thrones already happened, and so the others are already, like, defeated. And so then if you go back and then retcon all that stuff, it just feels like, okay, you're just trying to fix the end of the show. I think it's better than doing a Bran, centered show and his rule and how the Children of the Forest or maybe manipulating all this stuff. Like, all this stuff I just don't care about because it's all involving characters that don't matter anymore. They don't matter. I don't care about these characters. They are destroyed. And so you have that part of it. And so I would want to start, and again, I've said this at length. If we're going to do a sequel show, introduce new characters, introduce a new story. If you're going to use George R. R. Martin's world, either use prequel stuff, so things that they've started to do with House of the Dragon. You can go back to Aegon's Conquest. You can go back to Maegor and Aenys. You can go back to the Blackfire Rebellions. They're already starting to do those things. But if you're going to do a sequel, I think you have really two options. One option is you take a character that we know and build them around a new generation of characters, new people that we're going to come to maybe enjoy and love, and take us away from all the reminders of season 8. Or just go into the future where we don't know any of the characters. Maybe there's one or two characters that are like a Maester Aemon type, where they've lived a very long time and, you know, now they're basically ancient, right? So we still have people that maybe could connect to the time of Game of Thrones, but they're very few and far between, and have us tell a new story, right? And maybe we learn about some of the things that happened between season 8 and maybe a 100-year skip, right? We can find out maybe those things, or maybe it's like a 90 or 80-year skip, so some people are maybe still alive, right? That makes more sense if you're going to do a sequel show, in my opinion, than to just do a direct sequel continuing off of season 8. I just don't think that makes any sense to me. If you're going to do it, I think the Arya show does make a bit of sense to me, but that's my opinion. What do you guys think? Do you guys think an Arya show would be, you know, interesting or good, or do you think more on the lines that a Jon Snow show would be good? That's kind of the only two that's been really proposed so far, but I'd love to see your guys' opinions, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.